Hi, my name is Kerri Saint, and I have decided after 63 years to write my story, but it's not going to be in book form, it's going to be on YouTube. Eventually become a written book form, and the process is going to be by sharing the story with you here in a creative way through images and song, as well as reading it to you and speaking to you. Why I called it Out of the Pit is because when I grew up, I grew up in a family where I was forced to work in charcoal pits, and I thought it was very applicable to call the book Out of the Pit. Now, I shared with a friend, I said, what's the difference between wood and charcoal? Someone just said, well, it's dirty and it's black. But I want to share with you that the whole process goes into making charcoal, and first it comes in a healthy tree, the tree that's grown, and then that tree's cut down, and then it's aged, and then it's cut up, and then it's placed into a deep pit. And there's quite an intricate process that gets it to this point where it becomes charcoal. Once it becomes charcoal, it's sifted and then it's placed into bags. And the charcoal that you would buy that would burn in a fireplace like this or in your barbecue comes out quite chunky, and it's used in the same way. So it's the same thing, but there's a process that takes you to this point. But to buy it like this, it's in a pretty little package that makes it, you see the bag and you go, oh, that looks like a pretty good product and I'll buy it. You don't think for 1 minute what started that process. Adopted people belong to a biological family tree, and what happens is you're taken from that biological family tree, and a process happens similar to how you make charcoal. And through my story, I'm going to explain exactly what that process is to get the product that you see today and what they sell off as adoption. So that's what I want to share with you, the depths and the details of what adoption is and how the world sells adoption to you. I want to share with you how this is sold to you through movies and the media by a story that came out in 2016, a movie called Lion with Nicole Kidman in it. And we know that Nicole Kidman is an adoptive mother herself. And the story is that Saru, a young boy, gets separated from his brother and lost on a train, and he disappears and can't find his way home, and eventually he's in an orphanage and sent to Australia where he's adopted. He doesn't really remember his family until he's about 25, when he's sitting in the Indian restaurant eating traditional food, and he starts to have flashbacks about a family that he'd forgotten about. And in those flashbacks, he starts to really want to find his biological family, which he does. And it's a happy story. He goes back to India and he finds his mother, and everybody cries, and it's a happy ending. And it looks really good. It looks like a great story about adoption and all that, ends well. But there's another story inside Line about a brother to Saru called Mantosh, and that's the story that's not focused on. But this is the story that a lot of people don't realise is the truth to adoption. Mantosh's story is glossed over, but the reality is that most adopted people have experienced what Mantosh has. He's been ripped away from his family tree, placed in a foreign country, and he had been exposed to abuse and mistreatment and trauma in the process. But the movie doesn't focus in on him. That's not the palatable story like Saru's. And unfortunately, adoption has been sold to us in a nice little package, just like when charcoal arrives to us. But there's a deep, deep process that goes on to get it to this point, and we all go off and buy it, and we don't think for 1 minute, how did we get the charcoal? As a small child, I went through some pretty traumatic events. And not only was my adoption process filled with trauma in itself, but my childhood growing up with the adoptive family working in charcoal pits creating this also created its own trauma. So I'd like you to join me, but when you do, be aware that much of my story could be very triggering for you, regardless of whether you're adopted or not. So I really want you to take care of yourself, and I want you to make sure that you get the help and support you need. We'll bring up many issues in this YouTube video, not just my story, but the story of others. And we'll also go into the history of adoption in this country, what's happened and what hasn't happened to respond to people like myself. What I want to make very clear, and the whole point of this story, is that there's no duty of care in adoption. It's in the Adoption Act. Once a child is placed with the adopted family, there's no checkups, there's no responsibility, there's no accountability, and you're basically left on your own. I want to change that. I do not believe that adoption should ever be that way at all. There needs to be a duty of care, and there needs to be accountability. There needs to be acknowledgement to people who have suffered through adoption, and that means to the adopted person themselves, whether they went to a good home or not. I've changed the names in this story, except for my own. So if I'm talking about my adoptive parents and siblings and my biological parents, I've changed their names because this story is about me. This story isn't to vilify or make villains of any of the people in this story. It's about a system of adoption. It's about what it has done to thousands of people in this country and to myself, and what the end product has basically evolved into. The only name that will remain the same is my own, and I've decided to do that because Kerri survived my childhood, and Kerri deserves to have the truth told about her, and Kerri deserves to actually have a really good life. And if I had changed my name at all, I'd be rejecting her and telling her that she doesn't deserve a voice. Kerri deserves a voice, and I'm going to stay true to it. And I hope that you continue to tune into my channel and listen to my story piece by piece, and we'll discover what adoption's really about and where it took me and where I want it to go. Thank you for joining me.